who is in charge of making AI safe?
Especially as tech leaders try to buy up every stitch of media. Not them. They don't care. It should be the citizens who do that and our elected officials. They're putting AI in children's toys. That should be outlawed. Like 100% outlawed.
Is this consolidation, the AI revolution, are all these things just another technological moment we're at that's going to lead to a correction that's ultimately lead to growth and opportunity?
It could also lead to you're out of a job, my friend.
Welcome. Not surprising, this is a one of the most well-attended conversations we've ever had. I want to welcome you all to another Lunch with Jamie, and I want to thank you all for joining this afternoon. Remember to have your cameras on and make sure your name is correct on screen. I am so excited to be joined by Kara Swisher. She needs no introduction. Kara's a journalist, the co-host of Pivot, host of On with Kara Swisher. She's a New York Times bestselling author. If you haven't read Burn Book, take a second to buy it right now, or make that mandatory. You're not going to be able to get off this conversation without buying it. We have so much to talk about. She can talk about every topic, so we're going to try and breeze through a bunch of them. But Kara, as this is called Lunch with Jamie, although you and I are not eating lunch, I'm going to start with maybe the hardest question, which relates to food. Now, I know you are associated with San Francisco, but you live in D.C. and you travel the world. But I want to focus. If I was coming to visit you in San Francisco or D.C., where's a couple places you would take me?
Well, the food is a little better in San Francisco, like by a lot, actually. Probably the Anchor Oyster Bar in San Francisco. It's in my neighborhood. It's one of my favorite places on earth. I love oysters. And it's terrific. It's a great place here. And in DC, it's a little harder to figure out a place. I mean, there's a lot of good Jose Andres restaurants here that are okay. But in general, I mostly like the diners here, like some of the diners, and there's a bunch of them, like all around the DC area, which I like a lot. So I like a diner. But mostly San Francisco, I could name you 20 places I would take you to. But
well, I'm gonna go find you an Anchor Oyster Bar sometime. That sounds lovely. Listen, everybody on here knows you. They listen to you on Pivot, they listen to you on CNN, they read your work. But I want to just start briefly at your early days, because one thing I think is really fascinating is the fact that you were on a different path when you started this out, and that was towards the military. And I would love you to just talk about that briefly, because I think it's really interesting.
Sure. It's funny. I was just telling Jamie that I was interviewing Joe Manchin right now, who's from West Virginia, and my dad was born and raised in West Virginia, went to West Virginia University there. And he was in the military. He was poor, not wealthy, not poor, but not very, I guess, middle class. But he went to school on a scholarship from the Navy and went to medical school on the same thing. And my family's in West Virginia, especially West Virginia people are very heavily involved in the military, or in the military as a way to get out of poverty, really. And so I always had a great regard for the military, and I wanted to be in intelligence, essentially, scenario building, and I mean spying broadly, I guess, and was really interested in analysis and strategy and stuff like that. But I wasn't allowed to be because I was gay, and they had Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That was a Clinton administration special. So I couldn't be, when the time I was able to go in the military, I wouldn't do it because of those ridiculous rules, which are seemingly back right now, unfortunately, or in part. And then by the time I got old enough, I mean, when it changed, I was too old. I couldn't even be in the National Guard. I thought about it. They had a friend of mine who was pretty high up in the National Guard I was too old. So I never got to serve.
I guess the question is, would they take you in the National Guard or the military today? I feel like they'd take anybody.
Mulch in DC, so I'm glad I'm not in the National Guard, because that's what I'm doing right now. No, I just thought it was really important to be thinking, that it was such a canard that people who are liberal don't believe in things. And I did. I have a great regard for what the military did for my dad. And so I think, you need to have a diverse military. I think it's important. It brings us together. And, not doing necessarily military things, but just the idea of it. I think I would have made an excellent admiral. I would have been fired right now by Trump, but nonetheless, I would have been highly qualified. Been good. Been safer because I was at the helm of a giant ship.
I I listen. I have faith that you can do whatever you want to do and put your mind to. So I'll go with that. You would be a great admiral. Um, so you took a little bit of a path to journalism, but I've loved hearing about your first interview, your first job at the Washington Post. And could you talk a little bit about that and how you got there?
Well, I was a student at Georgetown. I went to the Foreign Service School because that was the path I was hoping, either the CIA or military or something in the government. As I said, I have a great regard for our government, our democratic government, at least that part of it. And I and I was there and wanted to go into the Foreign Service really, and I couldn't again because of the same thing, being gay at the time. It seems inexplicable now, but it was the case. And I also was interested in writing. I was a good writer. And I called the Washington Post because I was mad at them about something of the story that I had written. They had done a bad job on a story I'd written. And they called me down to complain, and they invited me down, the Metro editor at the time, this guy named Larry Kramer. And he hired me on the spot because I was so irritating. And I was just incensed that they did such a bad job. And he said, "Can you do it better?" And I said, "Every day of the week and twice on Sundays, sure." And they hired me. So it was one of those sort of classic stories of entering the workforce. And so I covered the college for the Washington Post. And then I parlayed that into a journalism degree, which was unnecessary, but then went back to the Post later, many years later.
Well, I love that Larry saw what we all are lucky to get today. So let's talk about the media business today. It has slightly changed since those times. One thing I love about you, I'm an eternal optimist. You talk about how you're getting frustrated by this concept of kind of the death of media and journalism and how excited you are about some of the things you're seeing. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, let me caveat it. I'm not excited about some of the things I'm seeing. Some of the people that are buying these publications, specifically the today, it's just another one. Jeff Bezos, as always, never disappoints at disappointing people. They just fired Karen Attiah, who was Jamal Khashoggi's editor, actually, because she did a a tweet that they didn't like. It was just stating what Charlie Kirk had said, an actual quote. So they said that was insulting because she quoted him. I don't understand that. So it's you don't have to agree with her, but for people who are owning these publications to lay people off for saying what they think is really, it's kind of interesting that the free speech warriors are just such snowflakes about things. And I get why they may be upset, it may be in bad taste. I don't really care. It just seems like, anyway, they were just looking for an excuse to fire her, actually. But it happens every day. These different people are trying to censor journalists and different points of view. And it's I always say, often when people really get very particular about something, I often say every accusation is a confession, and that seems to be what's happening right now. And so at the same time, there's all these really amazing things happening in journalism, including all kinds of different ways. Whether you're at Wired, and Katie Drummond, that's an old publication, is reinvigorating itself by being great at reporting. They did a great job on Doge. They're really trying to innovate within a bigger institution at Condé Nast. Or you're someone like Oliver Darcy, who just spun off from CNN and has created a really successful business with his newsletter, because it's a great newsletter and he does a great job, or different people. And so I'm always trying to look at stuff that's working, and it's all different, but it's very exciting. There's a lot of really interesting journalism. Puck is doing a good job. You can like it or not, but they're starting to be really interesting from an economic point of view. Of course, I think was an original, sort of the OG of doing that, leaving the Wall Street Journal to start my own thing. And I have to say, at this moment in time, I'm thrilled I own everything, because I don't have to listen to Murdoch or Jeff Bezos or anybody else. I can do whatever I want. And so I'm really interested in entrepreneurial behavior around journalism and media, because I think it's the only way to go at this point, especially as tech leaders try to buy up every stitch of media, the old media. I'm not so sure buying CBS is the finest idea in the land, but go for it, whatever. I'm about to do another one. I'm going to have a very conservative site, and I'm going to have Mehdi Hassan. There's all these different people, and I'm going to have people who disagree just talking about what they're innovating on. And like it can be video, it can be audio, it can be whatever it happens to be. But it's pretty cool what's happening.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think those people you reference are great. And I'd love to hear a follow up with that. And I do think it'd be interesting to hear the conservative perspective.
It's attracting audience to the thing you're peddling or whatever you're making or the content or reporting you're doing. So it's not different. You know, the point of view matters very little. I think it's the quality and what you're selling your audience or it has a respect for the audience so that you're making things people want to buy. It's not the most complex thing in the world.
And it is interesting. It does seem like between, and you obviously are one of the OGs between doing a newsletter, doing a podcast, doing in-person of live events or talks, you can put together a business. Do you, with all these, if the future is these kind of potentially these smaller outlets or individual journalists who are the ones who are really carrying the torch forward of facts or information, do you think there's anything concerning about that? I mean, I think in the sense of, I think there's a benefit when you have a democratic society sort of to be able to sort of be working off a similar set of facts. And if we become this sort of splintered universe where we're all getting our information from a smaller individual source, as if Oliver says he has 90,000 subscribers now.
I get your point. Listen, most of news was from a small sliver of people on the Upper East Side of New York for decades. It's like 12 white men from Yale and Harvard were giving us our news. So I'm not so sure that was like the most diverse a set of facts. And by the way, they didn't do such a good job on the facts, right? On some of them, they certainly portrayed it from their point of view. So I always feel like as much as splintered as it is, and you're seeing that in this murder of Charlie Kirk, in that you're getting all kinds of points of view. Well, that's more political, what's happening there. But the facts are, that's the difficulty of what's people believing, what's coming out about things. And I think that's difficult. I think probably most people didn't participate in that much media that you think they did. A small group of people did. And so now, instead of an information desert, which was, I think, the situation before, where there was, say, only 3 networks or whatever, you have an information flood. And it's more damaging, I would say, in a lot of ways, because a lot of it is toxic, a lot of it is false and everything else. And so it requires from people to have a really good sense of information and understanding. And so it can also trick people, especially with AI. And so it has more proclivity to do propaganda is what's happening. The tools are so inexpensive, and things like AI, it can look real. And so there's more of a danger of people not just having no information, having really bad information. And you've seen it around the globe, whether it's in Myanmar or different countries. Nepal right now is having that's the problem. It can set off a frenzy. And that's the real problem, I think.
Yeah. And listen, you bring up a great point, which is just, it's hard to believe we're kind of deciding this, but right, who determines what facts are, right? Who determines that answer? I mean, I think you set the old news system up interestingly, but I guess we didn't question it as much, right? For some reason, right?
Question churches. We didn't question government. We didn't. I mean, there has been a very clear. It's interesting because Hillary Clinton called it a vast right-wing conspiracy, but it's been on the right to credit, whether it's science or institutions of learning or media. It's been a very careful and organized effort to do so. And so that's where we find ourselves, is in this situation where the decrediting tends to work better than anything else. And so everybody is suspect, right? There's nobody and that's the whole point of the whole thing, is to make everyone, you trust nobody, and therefore it separates people because they don't have a trusted sense of information, right? Like Scott and I were talking about today on this this young man who killed Charlie Kirk. It's there's all these different sides sort of vying, like the Sharks and the Jets, for like who has what. It doesn't matter. None of what they're saying matters. Right now the right is focusing on trans issues. The left is focusing on, like, his grandmother says they're MAGA. The other side says that he's trans. None of it fucking matters. Who don't give a fuck what grandma thinks? Like, I don't know why. Grandma doesn't know why he did this, obviously. It may or may not be because he's MAGA. Who knows? The same thing with trans. Who knows? And I think what they benefit from is confusing you. And the whole point is what Scott and I are trying to make is you have no idea why this kid did it. Most likely because he was extremely online. And he was sort of steeped. I think Governor Cox had the best version of it. He's steeped online in a very dark place, and for some, and with the amount of guns in this country available, combined with an angry young man, we have a bad situation. That's pretty much all we know, and everything else doesn't really matter. Like it doesn't matter. Everyone's trying to do it to their political credit, whatever it happens to be. But what really matters is what caused this young man to move from these dark places he was online, which can make you feel very isolated and angry, to doing this act. Well, we do know the amount of guns is one of it, because it doesn't happen in other countries. And the other thing is that he felt isolated and alone, and felt that this was his only choice, I guess. And so that's what we should be looking at. And of course, anyone trying to make a political buck is just trying to take advantage of that. When it has no meaning whatsoever to what's actually happened here, and no one's particularly interested in solutions to this very dire problem.
It's the outcome, the response to the Charlie Kirk assassination is just. I guess we all knew that was really what you could predicted. Unfortunately, a lot of the response.
I was surprised by President Trump. I thought he really couldn't do it again on this thing, right? This is a friend of his, someone close to him. And I get the anger part of it, but for him to start on the left wing, what in the fuck? I was actually on Anderson Cooper when he started talking. And I was like, what? Like, he started off fine. Political violence has no place in our society. I was like, oh, phew. Thank God he's not going to go. And then he went off onto his crazy, rant. Cox was a lot better. The governor from Utah was much better. He got pressure from Trump. That's why he had to say trans 3 times the other day, which has nothing to do with this. Nothing. Zero.
I find it hard to believe you were surprised by Trump. I mean, you go back to the.
You can see my face. I was like, I can't believe right now this is his friend that was killed, that he has to do this.
But look at when the plane crash happened in D.C. and he went right to DEI.
He did. But of course, he immediately he's off. Instead of talking about Kirk now, he's talking about his ballroom again. Like it took him 5 seconds. This man has no. I'm sorry. He's a narcissist, and that's where we are with that. So. Wife, I push for term limits and age limits on politicians, both Democrat and Republican.
I heard the head coach of Oregon football, this guy Dan Gilman, gave a great post-game speech, and when asked about, he's obviously asked about the Charlie Kirk question. I mean, everybody is, and in there, I think there's some people who are really. Our politicians aren't the ones stepping up, although I think the governor of Utah has done a very good job overall. But we're not finding voices to help us through these moments right now.
No, not politicians, that's for sure. I mean, there are certain people that are trying to speak up, but all the Republicans are sort of been castrated by Trump, so they can't say anything, even though they certainly can. But they decided they can't, and the only ones that are doing it are ones that aren't running anymore. Tom Tillis suddenly found his. Balls suddenly this week, because he's not running. He doesn't give a fuck. So now he's doing what he thinks is right, which is our public servants should be here to be our public servants, not to do Instagram to hot takes on anything. Like, it's kind of ridiculous what's happening in that regard. But we really need to find a place where public servants act like their actual job, which is to serve the public. And it's sort of, that's gone the wayside, either because of pressure from Trump or on the Democrat side in the absence of leadership, right? That's not as bad, but it's certainly a bad thing when you have a vacuum of leadership. Everyone's vying to be at the center of the attention. And so you're going to have a period where, nobody's in charge. And I think there should be at least a feeling that there's a group of people that are thinking of the larger problem, and it feels, headless, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, I think your favorite topic in the tech world. I mean, and the social media companies. What we've seen on those sites post this murder. It's just even been worse, right? Because it's just
That's where Scott and I are placing much of the blame. I mean, everybody knows what Trump's going to do, right? Like, this is not a new, fresh notion that he will try to take advantage of any situation in a really ugly way. We should know this by now. It's not great, but it is what it is. And the social media companies, to Scott and I, they are absolutely. If I had to pick blame, it would be theirs. And they have this man got murdered on live, and they didn't take it down fast enough, right? They didn't remove those photos or those pictures. They were on autoplay, which is disgusting to watch. It's an execution you just watched, and a very vicious one. And then at the same time, they don't care about anything on their platform, and they don't. I've said this for years. I keep saying they don't care. I don't need to, and now they have more money than is necessary for anyone on this planet, and all they do is sort of suck up to Trump. And since he's a coin operated president, he is willing to take their money for getting the things they want, and they're doing the same thing as they go into AI. That's what they want. The juicy bits are not quite rich enough. I mean, hundreds of billions of dollars isn't quite rich enough. And so they're doing the same thing with AI and making it so a very small amount of people control what's going to affect our society. I mean, I was just interviewing Sherry Turkle the other day for this documentary I'm doing for CNN. And one of the things she noted is they're putting AI in children's toys, right? It's not just a Barbie that says, I love you. That's fine. Like, whatever. This is a Barbie that'll talk to your children. That should be outlawed, like 100% outlawed, right? And I've been very strong on these character bots and stuff in young people, and the inability of people, especially young people. Older people can't handle this stuff. Young people certainly can't. And so, but everything's for sale right now with these companies because they have more money and ability to lobby and everything else.
One of the things amazing about you is you never hold anything back, and whether you're staring somebody in the face or talking about it on the podcast, I mean, it doesn't make a difference to you, and I just love that. And the brutal honesty is so great. Your friends in Silicon Valley are usually at the end of a lot of those very angry comments, rightfully.
They're not my friends. Go ahead.
You're acquaintances for many years. People you've known, and covered. Is there anybody who's slightly getting it right now?
People I like Mark Cuban a lot. I think he's actually using his money and time for things that I think are worthwhile around. He's picked one thing and he's trying to fix it. One thing. He's not on this, like, he's being very specific, and I really appreciate it. There's a lot of people I think are doing things that I think are important, right? That are, and some of them are mixed bags, like Tim Cook or Sam Altman. They're mixed bags. And right now, Tim Cook's bag is not very attractive with that stupid golden statue, but he's sort of being forced into it, right? I mean, he could say no, but he can't, right? That kind of thing. But there's a lot of people doing amazing things, like all kinds of things. I have a lot of, there's all these people doing really interesting things around healthcare that are really interesting and possibly helpful. I just was with Jennifer Doudna at CRISPR, which is really groundbreaking, or some of these technologists working on AI and cancer that's why I'm focused in on, because they're the only people I can tolerate at this point, because they're actually doing something to help humanity. And so, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people doing really amazing things using these tools. I mean, the tools aren't the problem; it's how they're deployed. And so I really have a lot of regard for people who are using the tools for things that will help a broader swath of people rather than just themselves.
Well, one thing I find interesting is obviously TikTok is the dominant technology, but what?
Oh, he's just announced they got a deal. Whatever. Just hand it over to his friend Larry Ellison. That's really we said this weeks ago. It's not going to be a deal. The Chinese will be able to continue to spy on us. This is such a nonsense. Whatever they say, unless you see the actual particulars of the deal, it's all bullshit. He abrogated the law. There was a law that he's supposed to follow. He just ignored it, and now he's doing an inside deal for his friends. So whatever.
It's like moving around food on a plate or something like that, right? And not eating it.
Chinese still shouldn't have this much access to the American populace. Sorry, I wrote this 10 years ago in a piece. and saying, I love TikTok, it's the best new product I've ever seen, and I use it on a burner phone because the Chinese Communist Party is obviously going to use it to spy. It makes total sense to do so.
You've said some. I heard you say some kind things about Evan Spiegel, and it's interesting.
Yeah,
And
he has a troubled company, but sure, he's great.
what's so interesting is that, I know, you have varying ages of children. I have teenagers, and, Snapchat still becomes one of the most important tools for them. It's not where they're getting content per se, but that's a company that's seemingly actually doing it.
Well, he's innovative. He's doing interesting things. Everyone's copied all his best ideas. That's the problem he has, and he's too small. But I thought he had some problems. There's no question. I don't mind if people have problems along the way. I think what I like about him is when you bring them up, he doesn't act like you've like killed his entire family or something. Like he's more like, okay, and he'll have a debate with you. And I prefer people who are adults and can have a debate about things. And he'll say his piece, I'll say mine. And that's all you can expect from people instead of people who are constantly feeling like victims. Mark Zuckerberg, number one. I don't know if you know this, but he's really, really the victim of all of this, just so you're aware. Just in case you didn't know who the victim was, it is Mark. Second, obviously, to Elon, who's a real victim here.
Yeah, every night before I go to sleep, I want to think about both of them, make sure that they're okay.
I mean, just now this week with this he's so obsessed with trans issues because his daughter is trans. He's just being so hateful and murderous right now about trans people. But
You just alluded to this, and I know Scott's got an opinion on it, and I've talked to Sam Harris, who's got an opinion on it. These tech leaders, obviously the public companies, they have a responsibility to their shareholders. That's obviously something they love to hide behind, but there is an inkling of truth to that.
they have a responsibility to the society too, just like I don't know, people make chemicals. They great, we have chemicals that help us or pharmaceuticals that help us, but they also shouldn't poison us. They have a responsibility not to poison us. And if they do, they should be in jail. That's really how I look at it. They're not like they're just the same as every other industry, and they act like they're different, but they're not different. They're the same.
Right. I guess that's the interesting thing, right? We've looked at the healthcare industry, and we've looked at chemicals. You've looked at all these other things that have been poisoning our society for years. Somehow the tech leaders have kind of skirted that for a while, though you obviously bring awareness to it and attention, but maybe the rest we're taking
Place to so you can't sue them, you can't put them in jail, you can't do anything that you can do to other people. And so that creates that's why they're so rich. You think they're rich just because their products are so great? If I wasn't sued, you could do a lot of things. Can be sued, pharmaceuticals can be sued, chemical companies can be sued, lawyers can be sued, everyone can be sued, but this group of people who are the richest people on earth. And that's fine. That's something that's interesting to me.
One thing you talked about in that great conversation with the journalist was how they're all have to think about these lawsuits actually, and that's a big part of one of their issues is getting insurance, which I didn't cross my mind how big an issue that is.
Fuckers from tech who want to sue them, but that's different. That shouldn't be the case. They shouldn't. You make a mistake, and now your mistakes will be weaponized, unfortunately.
Do you think that independent journalists can kind of survive that? Do you think that's where a role of some of these bigger legacy media companies can play a role when protecting them?
Yeah, they can buy insurance. There should be a collective insurance. There could be all kinds of things. There's all kinds of innovative ways to protect themselves. There's nothing to do if a billionaire wants to take you down. That's just the way it goes. But you have to be, you have to be as careful as possible. That's all, and really make sure everything is very clear. A lot of these are nuisance lawsuits, really, and then it's designed to suck resources away from you, time and money and attention.
I want to get back to one thing related to media is just thinking about the role of legacy media as we go forward. The New York Times is obviously continuing to kind of iterate, and they're seemingly doing a good job. Their coverage can be questionable at times, but overall they're leaning into technology. I'm still a Luddite. I love my hard copy of the New York Times. I love my hard copy of the Financial Times. I want more newspapers. I'm obviously not in the majority. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution just announced they're going to stop printing by the end of the year. What role do you see in these companies? The Washington Post, the New York Times,
It's lost. Sorry, it's owned by a sad, pathetic person who doesn't care about journalism. So that's lost. Everyone's left. The New York Times is terrific. It's done by a woman named Meredith Levy and a family, the Sulzbergers, who are very responsible. They're great. They have a big role. I think the Journal has been pretty good. They've ups and downs, but the Murdoch, of all the things, he's done a nice job. Like, I can't stand Murdoch, but I think he's done a good job at the Wall Street Journal, and they're trying their best. They have a point of view. They're more conservative. They're more business focused, but I think they do a really great. They've done some great stories, by the way, broken some really important stories, including around Epstein. And so, there's some good like that. I think the networks are lost completely. And the cable networks are lost. I mean, their audiences are falling. Obviously, podcasts are growing. Ours are, or everybody's is. All the ones that are doing well are doing really well. And then young people get their information from everything from Reddit to YouTube to Instagram and stuff like that. So the social media companies are doing rather well in distributing news. And I think 4 out of 5 people use a Meta product on this planet every single day in some fashion.
That's heartbreaking and upsetting, and because do you think you talked about cable news for a minute? There is a small sliver of society that's maybe the most vocal that still gets a lot of information. One thing that really frustrates me is, and I had this crusade. That's a crusade of one at this moment, but I think we should take the news word out of their names. I just don't think it's a valid term. It's not factual. I think there's nothing wrong with opinion-based information. And
time day you're watching. During the day, it's largely news, for both, actually, even Fox is regular news during the day, and then it moves into screaming. But I think it's, I think the problem is, it was interesting. I had an interesting interview with John Malone, who was the creator of cable as we know it today. And he was, for some reason, he's gone a little off the deep end on the conservative side, but he was more like, well, it's okay if Fox does it because it's entertainment, but CNN shouldn't do it. And I was like, I'm sorry, you're like giving them a pass and then not giving them a pass. But I think what he was highlighting is that it's entertainment. All those things are entertainment, and unfortunately, some of the stuff on the other cable networks has moved into entertainment too, and I don't think that serves anybody. And news has lost. People aren't watching it. And so they're going to sell whatever. If people want to have Twinkies, they're going to sell Twinkies, right?
I really loved that John Malone conversation. It was really well done. And it was interesting to hear him. I mean, I appreciate, the thing I appreciated most is when he said how I guess embarrassed to some extent is how he missed so many things as a businessman.
He did. He's an old guy, but he's very smart. He's every now and then he keeps saying, we got to get blacks money. Like, I was like, oh God, like, if only they had money and all the problems. I was like, okay, I'm going to just, part of me, so the people were like, should you, I'm like, he's 103. I don't know what to say. Like, I'm not going to convince this old man not to talk like.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to change certain people and certain.
One of my uncles Thanksgiving, I could hardly get like. I'm like, okay, sure.
I want to shift gears a little bit into Hollywood. We obviously we have a new kid in town with David Ellison taking over Paramount. The newest rumor now is his next sites are on Warner Brothers. Consolidation is something as a producer that we are very unhappy with. It's really hurting.
Well, then you're going to be very unhappy because that's the only choice is consolidation. So,
and is that's your kind of your belief? There's no other sort of.
I can do math. It's just math, and it's just you cannot have. First of all, do we need 3 news organizations like that? They're not adding and they're subtracting audience. Their audience is declining. Like, there's 3 of them losing audience. It doesn't make any sense. I think you got to save money on the back end with lawyers and HR, and it just doesn't. The finances aren't there. And the money they've been spending on the talent is crazy, like crazy. Like, I was talking to someone at CNN, I'm not going to say who, was making many millions a year. And I said, can you attribute your presence to $10 million in revenue? I don't believe you can. So what are you doing here? Like, you know what I mean? Like, the finances, the economics are out of line with, and the amount of people, as much as you don't like it. Like, I have 8 people on everything I do. 8. That's it. Right. Okay. And it's not because I'm like, let's get rid of people. I'm very efficient in how we do things. And I think, unfortunately, Hollywood has not been particularly efficient, and they haven't responded to the audience as well as they could. And so they've unfortunately gotten caught in a bind and let the technology companies, who are inadequate to the task, let me just say, take over in that way. And of course, they're going to find efficiencies, whether it's AI. There certainly will be a lot of AI, and the Ellisons, Oracle just absolutely shot up the stock market. Now he could buy 7 Warner Brothers with the money he just made, like the other day, essentially. And so this is small ball to him. And so he could use AI to do all kinds of things. There's going to be consolidation. There's just no, I mean, I know everyone's like, oh, maybe it won't be. I'm like, yeah, it will be. Like, yeah, that's what, like, it's like farming, or it's like, and I know people don't like to hear that, but it's very easy to see the inefficiencies in how things are made and distributed are very prone to technologies. And they already have been, by the way, over the course of recent years, last 20 years. But now it's very clear it's going to be owned by the big Hollywood studios are going to be owned by a very few amount of people, probably tech companies.
Yeah, I hear your point. I think I'm frustrated because, one of the most important things that America has is its soft power and the diversity of ideas and the content that's been created. And, your buddy Scott likes to always talk about how, Paramount was purchased for $8 billion. And that's like, NVIDIA trading for like 5 minutes or something like that.
That is right. He made $28 billion the other day, Larry Ellison. He was $120 billion richer. Like Scott says, he could get, if he had 10 kids, he could get each of them a Paramount.
But I guess the flip side, and I need your help on this. I think Hollywood needs your help, is, making a great movie or a great song or, some piece of soft power that no amount of money NVIDIA can make. Yeah, sure. NVIDIA could just say tomorrow, I'm going to make all products stop working, right? But second to that, nobody cares about those in an emotional way that actually really affects people and how it changes people's minds and hearts. And
you do it independently. It's not like Hollywood has a great history of like loving and being diverse. Just let's not, like, comparatively, like, come on, like Hollywood was run by a bunch of guys forever, like it just was. So this romantic idea of what Hollywood was. Now they do make beautiful movies, or some are good, some are not good, some are sort of schlocky, some are great. I think there has to be a new way to do the economics of it and figure out what that is. I have gone to Hollywood hundreds of times and saying you have to figure out a new economic situation, like over and over and over again. And they liked the economic situation as long as it was made. Same thing with newspapers. It was working until it wasn't. Well, now it's not working. So how can creative people join together and figure out a way to finance these? I don't know. I don't know. I don't have an answer. I just know that you're either going to have to work for, like, look at my career. I either have to work for David Ellison or not, and I choose not to. I'm not going to work for David Ellison. Are you crazy? I don't want to work for them. I don't want to work for Rupert Murdoch. And so I created an economic situation for myself where I didn't have to, right? And because, largely because I don't want to work for them. I don't want to listen to them. I don't want to talk to them. So, that's what a lot of people in Hollywood are going to have to do, is what is the way you can make movies utilizing technologies at the same time in efficient ways to be able to be creative and to have a good business, right? It doesn't have to make a lot of money. Like, it just has to break even, essentially. Especially if your goal is art, that could be fine if you were that. For years and years, they kept looking at Silicon Valley and acting like they couldn't have done the same thing, and they could have. They absolutely could have, and they didn't. They kept those high salaries and those town cars and those big bunches of flowers, and I was always sort of astonished that they didn't move faster in the oncoming onslaught, as if these tech companies weren't going to eat them up too.
Well, listen, I guess the question becomes, is the answer consolidation, or is the answer, Warner Brothers cutting its cost by 50%? Right? I mean,
David Zaslav, so they can't possibly do that. That's ridiculous.
But no, but in a serious level, I mean, listen, you've seen it in every industry, and maybe to some way, the optimistic approach today is right. You saw it with music, right? Music was dead; it was gone. Streaming killed it. We thought when news media there was consolidation that all of a sudden those businesses were gone, and then you see Axios come up, and you see Axios Daily and Local and all these other things. The independent journalists. I guess the question is this consolidation? Is the AI revolution, are all these things just another technological moment we're at that's going to lead to a correction that's ultimately lead to growth and opportunity?
It could. It could. It depends on who you are. It could also lead to you're out of a job, my friend. Like that's the issue. Is the question is, like Scott and I were just talking about costumers, for example. We were talking about Fantastic Four, and I think he was noting that they had 40 costumers in Sweden. And he's like, I could think of 6 ways to do costumes that don't require costumers, right? And he's just Scott, right? And so I think you just have to figure out how you can be more efficient and remain creative. And you certainly, creativity doesn't cost anything. It really doesn't, actually. What costs is how you put together the business. And again, it's just math. It's just, when David did the Warner deal, when he did the Discovery deal, I had said something on the podcast saying, sorry, but he has too much debt. He can't grow. And if he can't grow, he can't be creative. And he's created a situation for himself where he's overpaying himself, which of course he is. But he's not going to be able to grow out of this debt. And I don't care how much he gets it down. You can't cut your way to growth. You can't. You just can't. So he calls me and he said, well, I'd like to talk to you about that. And he's like, and we went out to drinks and he goes, I think you're wrong. I said, okay, fine. And he goes, we can do that. I go, well, I can't wait to see it. And I said, but I can do math and you don't seem to be able to do math. But right now you can't really grow on 50 billion, whatever it was at the time. Now he's managed to cut the debt, but it's still there. And look at now he's breaking it apart or else selling it. Like it didn't work. And so I just like to go with the math. Math is always my favorite thing to do. Like I can count. And so you can either stay in business because you like X is just in business because he wants to have it. There's nothing economic about that business. But if you're rich enough, you can have the stupidest yacht on the planet. It doesn't matter. Or you have to actually build a business that makes money. It's really not that complicated in terms. And you have to build audience that wants to pay for whatever you're making. It's not, the minute pivot becomes uninteresting to our audience, we will not be in business anymore. So we're interesting to our audience.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. By the way, out of curiosity, who is the basis of your impersonation for just sort of, I don't know if it's like the bosses you have? I feel like you always go to the similar impersonation, which I love that voice. I don't know if there's got to be some person.
We don't even know that. No, all the people we've met along the way, just the people. I mean, I'll tell you, this show works because of our relationship. It's a relationship show. It's about two people on a journey together to learn things. And so that's a really classic trope from Hollywood. That's like Cheers or, it's a comedy. It's a bit of a drama. I think we also provide insight to people. We also show a way to disagree civilly. I think people are desperate for that. So you can just see the pieces of why it works, and it wouldn't work without the chemistry between us. That's clear. And that's why I do Scott for August every year to show him that I can replace him at any time. No, I can't. Although Rachel got close and Gavin was great. That was a great show with Gavin.
I love your partner, but I enjoy Scott for August. I was fine for a month. I was fine for a month off.
See, for example, that one we actually picked people who had other podcasts so we could trade podcasts. And that was really great. It was a great marketing event and also was great content too. So that was a really smart thing, the way we traded back and forth. Which was cool because everyone can get a taste of us and they could get a taste of that person. So everyone had a podcast who was on.
We're sadly getting towards the end of our conversation, I know, which is a wild. But I want to jump into AI a bit. You obviously are at the forefront of a lot what's going on and the new developments. Even in how we scheduled this conversation, AI played a role and I failed miserably. I felt like a 3-year-old in tech at this, worse than that.
Schedule save on Google that, someday you won't need to. I'm going to look at some of these questions. Chris Freilich is absolutely right. I didn't believe Murdoch was buying the Journal and I did buy him lunch for that. But he was right and I was wrong. Lee Enterprises. Yes, that's a really interesting company. I agree with you. But that's a really interesting, they're cutting themselves to success, but they're making a substandard product. Gavin, I think you can't, that's a game you can only play for so long. You can't play, that's milking of an asset. That doesn't last. It just doesn't. You can make money in the process, but it doesn't last. Yes, it's really is sad to see what happened. Although the Emmys were fun last night. Gavin, I like Gavin. I know it's a controversial thing, but I think he's actually showing some muscularity as a politician. He's funny. I think he's self-deprecating. I have a soft spot for Gavin only because at a time when it was very risky to do that gay marriage thing and it ruined his career for a good 10 years, he did it. And he was a leader. So that he's going to get a pass from me for a lot of things that he does. But I thought he's showing he's not the only choice, but I think he's showing some pugnaciousness and muscularity that's required at this moment, not trying to pretend Trump is going to change at all. So I kind of like that.
Had you counted Gavin out in some ways? I mean, a lot of people had.
No, I didn't. No, I think a tall, handsome man, white man. No, I don't ever count those people out. No, I haven't. I've always thought he's a really interesting politician. I think he had some negatives. He seems a little unctuous and etc. But I think he's done a really nice job in the current moment. I think he's smart and savvy, and there's others. I like Laura Kelly from Kansas. I think Democrats actually have a better bench than Republicans have become such like toadies to Trump. It's really kind of embarrassing at this point. So I think there's actually an open lane for a Republican who has some fucking guts. You started to see Spencer Cox doing that, and you have, but then he had to say trans. Like, just I'm sure they just were like say trans 3 times, and then but he's an interesting I do still think he's an interesting politician, and whether I agree with him on a lot of things. I thought he actually showed some leadership. There are I think probably David McCormick might emerge as someone who people will find interesting if he could find his balls at some point.
I do think the Democrats bench is deep and really interesting, right? Like, some people are going to fall away, but they're really interesting. I find it strange that I'm actually getting excited about Republican bench of people who are rational and sane and human. Like, I mean, it's
after Trump goes, I think he'll find it'll fall apart rather quickly because it is being held together by a charismatic and very talented, one of our most talented, whether you like him or not, one of the most talented political figures, in terms of sort of like Huey Long if he had lived, essentially. And I think he is. I think once he goes, you can see the fissures in that group very clearly. Like you start to see them at various times, whether it's the Loomer gang or the Marjorie Taylor Greene gang or the who knows with Mike Johnson. He's such a toady, but there's it's going to be difficult to sustain without him. And I know J.D. Vance thinks he can, but he's literally the most charmless politician on the planet. And so I think the minute he's not standing next to Trump, just the way Elon didn't do very well when he wasn't standing next to Trump in Wisconsin, for example, I think that's a very different story. I think J.D. Vance is repellent to voters, actually. And, I don't think that couch thing was fair, but you kind of believed it. So like, that's a problem. If you're like, oh, he probably could fuck a couch. Like I could see it. Like, I don't think I don't know if he did. I don't care if he did, by the way. He can do whatever he wants because I'm that kind of gal. But you kind of believed it. You're like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean the flip side though, although JD Vance is arguably the most spineless politician in that we have in the modern era, which says a lot. Betsy Bullard is one of our members, pointed out that he hosted Charlie Kirk podcast today.
God, that guy, his friend is not. I don't even know if he's buried, and he's now taking advantage of it. My mom is a Trumper, and you should see her friggin' phone. It's crazy. They're all trying to raise money off of Charlie. I almost felt sorry for, I do feel sorry for Charlie Kirk and his family in terms of his terrible death. But I was sort of like amazed how quickly they've moved into like, let's raise some money. Let's get on the podcast. Ew, yuck. I mean, they would walk over each other if they needed to. Seriously, I've never seen, if you looked at my mom's phone, you'd be like, are you kidding me with what they're trying to do? It lacked any kind of, I was like, didn't he just die? Should we perhaps take a moment? And, it was so disrespectful. It was crazy. Maybe he would have done the same thing. I don't know. But it was pretty grotesque. And I think him hosting it is great. And also Charlie Kirk did an okay job on that. By the way, it was lower than Pivot, way lower than on our thing. But he did an okay job on that podcast. But J.D. Vance has the charm of a mollusk. I mean, he's not going to be a podcast star.
Right. Yeah. Um, back to AI for a minute. Wendy Freeman, as a number of our members, brought up this concept of you had talked about, just how AI fakes are going to play a role. I think it's something we're all scared of. The disinformation, not knowing what's real or not. You in your conversation with Runway AI's founder, he mentioned something about this idea of watermarking things that aren't AI and making it the responsibility, which I thought was actually really potentially an interesting solution.
I thought that's actually what YouTube suggested to when they were stealing all that stuff from like all the companies they were stealing the stuff from. Yeah, that's the idea of this is real. This is a watermarked real thing. Everything else is if it's not watermarked real, it's not real. I thought that was interesting. I haven't put it up yet. Runway did a video of me like as Tom Cruise and everything else. It was pretty good. We tried to use their tools, weren't as good, right? So they're still, but in the hands of professionals, it's actually pretty interesting. One of the things I thought that interview was interesting was not so much in making of a movie, because I think that's what everyone's terrified of, but the back end stuff, like storyboarding and planning and changing out costumes and stuff like that. That's where the real efficiencies are, right? The stuff that costs a lot on the back end. And so I thought that was the most interesting part of that interview was that you're not going to suddenly see an AI movie that's any good, like for a long time, but you are going to see improve just the way special effects and that came in. It's more like, I think he was right that it's more like that.
I appreciated you push back a bit on his comment about, oh, don't worry, it's not going to take jobs. What it's going to do is it's going to allow people to have their weekends and people aren't going to have to work 24/7.
Yeah. I don't eat that much food. I'm not that hungry because I can't. Yeah, I'll be skinny without Ozempic. But he was, yeah, that's ridiculous. I mean, the broader point he was making is correct. Every technological change has resulted in more jobs, but he's leaving out the people that were displaced, in the interim and put in positions of real pain. Farming to mechanize farming is a good example. All those farmers went somewhere, and a lot of them went to bad places, and that caused quite a bit of social distress at the time, right? Whether it was unions or whatever. So there's going to be social distress. I just think the point he was making is, oh well, those people get left behind, and I'm like, what do we do with the people? How do we retrain people? It is an opportunity. I mean, you can be right about the same thing. It's an opportunity, but it's also a very clear social problem that we're facing.
Do you think, and I want to leave our conversation. I always like to be hopeful and optimistic. So I'm scared to asking this question, but right now, obviously the tech companies are not setting any rules or boundaries when it comes to AI. And government's obviously not setting any boundaries or rules. So who is in charge of making AI safe?
Not them. They don't care. You think everyone's like, oh yeah, they'll do it. I'm like, they didn't do it last time. I'm sorry. I don't believe them. I don't believe anything they say. There's an expression, I think it was a book in Hollywood, Hello, He Lied. That's how I feel like everything's out of there. Someone in tech was like, why don't you believe me? I said, because you're speaking. Like, I don't know what to tell you. You're a liar, essentially. And they're like, oh, someone was like, oh, that's rude. I'm just speaking the facts. Like, that's what you do. You lie. So I don't think, the citizenry and our politicians and our regulators have the responsibility to do something about it. We've regulated everything else. We regulate not perfectly and sometimes it's cloddish, but the elected representatives of the people of the United States should be regulating this. That's, I hate to say it, Ted Cruz should be regulating it more than Sam Altman. I'm sorry. I can't stand Ted Cruz. I think he's a ridiculous person, and a hateful person, but he should be the one making decisions. He was elected by the people of Texas. So should all the state governors. So should the citizens of those states should start to do that. And we should be able as citizens to sue these companies when they violate things. Just like Anthropic just paid that $1.5 billion. There's more of those to come because they're not quite protected by they're just information thieves. That's copyright thieves is what they are. And so I think there should be an ability for these companies to be subject to litigation and regulation. The problem is this particular administration is a coin-operated administration, and the person who runs the FTC and the FCC are literally, again, I'm using this term too much, but unctuous toadies is what they are, and so they'll do whatever whatever the president says, and that's not how they were designed in that way. You don't have to like Lena Khan, but she wasn't taking orders from Joe Biden, that's for sure. And so we should be able to, have this sort of robust debate in Congress about what to do and pass laws that should be able to be passed that protect. Interestingly, a lot of conservatives are quite wary of tech. That's interesting. They used to be called conservatives because they like Lena Khan. But there is a bipartisan feeling around certain issues that I hope will grow to other issues, like child safety is one of them. They seem to meet, Marsha Blackburn agrees with AOC, I think. Like that's a weird Venn diagram of zero. But there is a lot of stuff that it'll start with safety of children when you start to see some of these stories in AI, essentially convincing children to kill themselves or creating all kinds of nonsense around kids. I think that's where you're going to start. And then all I do is put focus on that because I'm like, I'm sorry, you really can't release the equivalent of heroin to our children and think we're not going to come after you, essentially. And then, things like this, like a very good example is this OpenAI Mattel thing. I think OpenAI is an interesting company. I think Mattel makes very nice Barbies. My daughter likes it, but how the fuck can they put AI into Barbie? They can't. They cannot be allowed to do it. I'm sorry. They don't have, without any controls or regulations. Are you kidding me? No. Like that, we should be able to say that. I'm good. That's the next thing I'm going to scream about for weeks and weeks. Hopefully someone will notice. But some stuff like that, it should be the citizens who do that and our elected officials.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, I don't know how optimistic I am. If we can't get anywhere on gun control, right? How are we going to get somewhere?
Yeah, well, the gun control goes deeper in the American psyche. This is something I think most people tend to agree on, and also will take action on. Guns is a particular sickness of this country that we haven't been able to overcome since the beginning, and so that's a very different situation. I think most people, whatever side of the political divide you're on, really do not want a Barbie AI talking to their children. I have 4 kids. I would literally run my car over it if that was the case. Now I'm going to get sent a box of them by, what's his name? The guy who runs it.
Anon will send you a box.
Get one.
Yeah. What are you just 2 things before we finish up? One, what are you talking to your older kids about when it comes to AI and having them prepare to sort of work within AI and how to use it or not use it?
It's interesting. They're older. They're 20 and 23. And so I let them, they're very smart. I am heartened by young people because they're very smart consumers. They've grown up with it and they have a little more smarts around it than people in their 30s. People in their 30s and 40s have lost their minds, I think, in terms of how they use social media. But they're a little savvier. And I think, they're very discerning customers of that stuff. And I didn't have to teach it to them. I think they're very aware. I don't think they're easily tricked. In fact, I sent my son last night a meme, a Charlie Kirk meme. I just was showing them memes that were sort of tasteless right now. They're all over the place. And my son was like, this doesn't help anybody. This isn't, it was really interesting, his reaction. I think I get that with a lot more young people. I find I have a great hope for people in their early 20s. I really do. I find them savvy and smart about this stuff. So I feel good that way. And I don't think they're easily fooled by either political party, by the way. And they certainly, I know there's all these stories about that there are, but I think there's a lot more sense. And I've been interviewing a lot more sensible politicians, whether it's Sarah McBride from Delaware, who's taken endless fucking shit from that lunatic Nancy Mace, who really needs some mental health expertise coming to help her. But she had a quote. She's great, Greg Cesar. I've been interviewing a lot of younger legislators who I really like a lot, and I think they're very sensible in many ways. And I think all of them seem to have the idea that you need on imperfect allies, right? We have to, on the Democratic side, we have to stop looking for perfect allies. It's not going to happen, right? Or violent agreement about everything. You're going to have a Zoran Mandani in New York, and you're going to have an Abby Spanberger in Virginia, and they're going to be very different. And politicians should be who they are, where they are, and serving the constituents they do, and then they can sort out the rest in policy. I think this idea that we should have one Democratic Party is, I think the strength of the Democratic Party is in diversity, but writ large, let people be who they are, where they are. And so one of the things that I'm pushing for, and I think young people really get this. I do, they don't. Someone somewhere is different from somewhere everywhere, and we don't have to agree on everything, and it shouldn't be a litmus test. With the Republicans, I think they're going to have a much harder time pulling out of this Trump thing once it's over, and I think it'll be very hard for them. And they've opened the gateway to a third party. I know everyone talks about no third party, but I think there is an actual right now. 25% of people are Democrats, 26% of people identify as Republicans, and the whole middle is independent. It really is crazy. Now, a lot of these people feel disaffected, but it's an opportunity. And again, I can do math. That's an enormous opportunity for someone to run up the middle. And I don't mean centrist, because whenever someone says they're centrist, it means they don't stand for anything. But it's an opportunity for a common sense kind of person to talk about solutions, like Daniel Lurie in San Francisco, or there's all kinds of politicians. There's, in Cox, in a way, a lot of them governors. I always look to governors too, because they have to fill a pothole, and potholes aren't bipartisan, or not partisan, excuse me. So
Last question. I'm sort of maybe teeing up you in some ways with your third party idea, but who, and I'm taking advantage of the opportunity of asking you this question of who is your biggest winners and losers of 2025?
Oh, I don't know so far. It's been such a shitty year. I am interested. I think Newsom has been a winner for this year, at least. I think it was really interesting. I do think Mamdani is really interesting. You don't have to agree with someone on everything, but besides, I think he's talking about affordability. I think his focus on affordability and getting people better services was a really deft move from someone like him. I think he's also a very interesting candidate. One of the things a lot of people, Democrats don't want to back, Kathy Hochul just backed him, right? But they all don't want to do it. And I was talking to a very well-known senator, and he, of course, had never watched his videos. And he's like, oh, I was like, have you fucking watched them? Because if otherwise, I'm not talking to you. Like, just watch them. So I made him watch 10 of them, and he called me back. He goes, I see your point. Like, the minute he understood what was happening. And my whole argument to him was, listen, I get the controversies around him. First of all, as Scott said, the mayor of Newark does not make Israeli policy. So let's stop defocusing on the important things. The other thing was, is that we ask young people to vote. Right? We ask, oh, they never vote. They're such bad voters. They voted. They made a choice, and you don't like their choice. You cannot insult them for their choice when you ask them to make a choice and tell them their choice is shit. I don't understand. And then hand them a candidate like Cuomo, who is so bad and so full of mess and Adams, and then you're telling them that's their choice. I'm sorry. They made the right choice for themselves. And so I feel like we should respect that. Same thing in Virginia, same thing if you're in any state. You make the choice that's right for you at the time, and you do not tell the voters. The only thing I believe in this country right now is voters. They will vote the way they want to vote, and they could be tricked and fooled and, whatever, but I still believe voters will make the right choices in the end. And that's the only thing we can count on. And you have to stop disrespecting their vote, because it's a unique privilege this country has. Not unique, a lot of countries have it, but it's a unique privilege of being an American.
Do you have a biggest loser of 25 so far?
Well, I think the tech leaders have just really. I was like, can they go lower? Oh, look, so they can. That dinner was so embarrassing, and I literally sat there. I'm like, if I had that much money, I would do this. This is what I would do. Like, how much money is enough? And I called one of them and I said, you're so poor, all you have is money. Like, shareholders. I'm like, shut the fuck up. Like, seriously, like, stop. At some point, you have a social responsibility not to be such a toady. Like, there is. And if you've had that much money, like, I remember seeing Elon Musk at Mar-a-Lago on New Year's. Do you remember that picture? Him dancing to YMCA? It was so sad. I kept thinking, if I was the world's richest person, I would not be in this place. Like, why is he there? I was sort of like, if I was, what would I do? And I was joking to someone, I would buy France and then I would give everyone a glass of wine. Like, I don't know, like anything. But I thought, oh my God, this is what all that money gets you. Man, I have a great life. I don't know. I didn't do much here, so but I didn't do that. I'll tell you that. Anyway, Swan Oyster Depot is great too. but I like Anchor Bar better. Someone noted.
Swan Oyster Depot is great. You're right. But before I let you go, you said something on your podcast because everybody's always looking to do something, and I don't want to make this just a political thing. And I like to leave people with action. But you referenced a story of something you heard about what women were doing to fight back against ICE. That I'd love for you to relay that to everybody.
Oh, I just had heard this story that all these white ladies, the Karens of the world, they were putting Mexican flags on the back of their cars and then they would stop. Like they would get stopped. It's easy to get stopped, and they just talk to stop, never stop to. Oh, hi, how you doing? What are you doing? Why are you here? Where are you from? Like be an irritating white lady for like the longest time possible, so you could delay what they're doing. This is the only thing I do have to say is. There was just a report out that these National Guard people are totally embarrassed they have to do this. Like there was like they let it out. Someone must have leaked it. I don't take it out on them. Like that's their job. They unfortunately have to be here. They couldn't be nicer. Like I have to, I kind of like the sandwich guy because I thought it was funny. Probably you shouldn't throw sandwiches at people, but I thought I don't take it out on them. That they have to be there. I know they're embarrassed. They should be. Many of these people are doctors and nurses, police people. They should be in there where they live and helping the people of their area, and not this putting mulch down in my neighborhood. Like I find it ridiculous. But I still like the Karen thing. I thought it was a great.
I like that too. That's great. Kara, I can't thank you enough for this. This was beyond fascinating. I love listening to you any day I get a chance to. And I just appreciate what you do and who you are and the honesty that you keep with your beliefs. So thank you.
Some point I'll run out of space, but we have a lot of great stuff coming up on. We've got some really great, especially a couple of good Hollywood ones too. So listen, we're very interested in figuring out how to get through this period of time with media, and I think you don't have to be negative about it necessarily. All right. Anyway, thank you guys. I gotta get to it.
Okay. Bye everybody. Thanks. Okay. Bye everybody. See you again soon.